environmental, social and ethical. On all three counts, it would appear that DOW does not currently fulfil those requirements. Can you tell me what work you did on compliance, on ensuring that DOW did match up to those guidelines before you accepted them as a sponsor?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Let me take it in the order that you raised it. Yes, absolutely. I think we all know, remember the human tragedy that took place in 1984. And we have looked at this, and we've looked at it thoroughly. I'll deal a little bit in a moment with the procurement process that you raised. We have looked at the history of this, and we are satisfied that DOW were not the owners, the operators, or involved with that plant or that site at the time of the disaster, and actually crucially at the time that the overall settlement was made. And again, the explosion was 1984, the overall settlement was made in 1989. It was upheld in 1991 and then again in 2009 by the Indian Supreme Court. And we have looked at this very carefully, and everything we know and have seen, we stand behind DOW. As a partner, they are a global partner with the International Olympic Committee. They are within our territory, able to associate with the London Games, and yes, they are providing the RAP. It is worth remembering, of course, in the public expenditure round in 2010, the RAP was removed from the public budget, the Olympic budget, so that we went out with a very specific tender to the marketplace to find a commercial solution to that, to the RAP. Not a branded commercial solution at Games time. We went through a thorough process, and actually on the three points that you raised, I think you talked about environmental, ethical and social. Actually, they met by some distance every one of those requirements in that process, and by a distance the sustainable option, which in their case meant that the material they're using is entirely recyclable.
Right. You'll understand that in India this was more controversial than anywhere else, and that there were calls for a boycott in the Indian press at the time. Can you tell me?
At the time
that DOW was announced as a sponsor. There were calls in the Indian press.
I'm actually very familiar with the Indian. With India and the Indian press for all sorts of reasons. I don't think that was actually the case.
Well, I think the briefings we're given are normally pretty accurate. Have you been in discussions with the Indian Olympic Association? Have you been talking to them about local concerns about using DOW as a sponsor? Or is it your position that there is no concern from India about DOW?
I'm in permanent contact with the Indian National Olympic Committee, again for all sorts of reasons. You wouldn't, as chairman of the organising committee, and the invitation to India to be here, I would always do that. I have no sense at all that the Indian National Olympic Committee have even broached the thought of a boycott.
No, because the suggestion is written in the press, and then there's a corollary question: have they raised concerns with you about DOW as a sponsor, and if so, have you been able to allay the concerns they might have had?
No, they haven't.
So there have been no concerns whatsoever from. What about the Indian media? Have they contacted you, asked for a statement, asked for?
Not directly, no.
Right, okay, thank you.
There's a major campaign being launched today about this whole issue, as mainly cross-party members of Parliament, various individuals and organisations. Have you met with them?
Have I met with those
who are organising this campaign?
Yes, I've met with members of Parliament. I met with Keith Vaz the other day. I met with Tessa Giles. So yes, I am politically across this.
So are you sympathetic to what they're saying?
No, we've had my conversation with Keith and Tessa were very open, but I do make the point that, of course, I have been through the history of this. I'm not unaware of the size and scale. I am the grandson of an Indian, so I'm not completely unaware of this as an issue. But I am satisfied that at no time did DOW operate, own, or were involved with the plant either at the time of the disaster or, crucially, at the time that the full and final settlement was made.
I can understand where you're coming from, sir, but the problem is that they're still paying the legal bills against the local victims.
I'm sorry, I didn't...
DOW are still contesting it in court, and DOW are paying the legal costs against the victims of Bhopal. And it looks like they're going to win the case. So that means the victims of the Bhopal disaster are going to lose out. And DOW is paying the legal costs for that.
Well, all I would say, or can I actually go into that kind of detail? That's a question you should put it out. But I do make. I do make the point that the Indian Supreme Court has upheld on 2 separate occasions the settlement that was reached by the previous owners of that plant.
But are you not concerned that the harm that this could cause to the reputation of the Olympics?
No, of course. I said I've gone through the history of this. I've looked at it very closely. I have gone through the history, but I am satisfied that as I said, the ownership, the operation, and the involvement, either at the time of the disaster or crucially at the final settlement, was not the responsibility of DOW. There are ongoing issues. Absolutely, there are ongoing issues. And they are with the Indian government, and they are actually with the state of Madhya Pradesh, who were the owners of the land.
But I mean, if you can understand the sensitivity when these people are suffering horrific injuries at the same time that this company has been flagged up as some major company in the British Olympics, I mean, were they the only tenders for this?
Well, I'm not here as a spokesman for DOW, but DOW were not the owners, operators, or involved in the site at the time of the disaster. That's beautiful.
There's a moral question there.
You're telling me that.
Right. Were they the only tenders for this?
No, they came through a competitive process, and as I said, I will stand absolutely behind our procurement process, and it looked at the options that were on offer and the sustainability of those options, and by some distance they came out ahead on every one of those indices.
So if I could just finish this, given that you've just heard that they're paying the legal costs, are you prepared?
I'm not in a position to know that detail.
Now I'm telling you that's the situation. Are you in a position now to go back to DOW and ask them to stop paying the legal costs?
So what legal costs are they paying?
The victims are claiming compensation, and DOW is challenging them.
Well, they're just paying their own legal costs. They're not paying.
No, well, obviously they're not paying the victims' costs.
No.
But the victims are poor people who cannot, no way can stand up against these people. They're the victims, and this has all been dragged into the Olympics.
I'll make one clarification. I don't think it's come across yet. The DOW became a part of the Olympic movement in July 2010 when the IOC announced them as a top partner.
I mentioned that.
Yeah, I just wanted to be.
Yeah, they're a global partner. They have association. They are rights to the London Games.
That exists anyway, and so this is a relatively. I mean, the RAP is actually a small procurement. Which we had to go and do simply because the government was paying away.
The only thing I would say, sir, is a major area of concern amongst parliamentarians and others, and I think Steve's got a question as well.
Yeah, only because these things quite often can come from left field, and if this was to kick off, if this was to become a major issue, as it possibly could, is there any other way that you could find sponsorship, or sponsorship could be attractive for the RAP if DOW were to perhaps do the honourable thing and pull out?
Well, I think I made it pretty clear this morning. I'm satisfied and I'm comfortable about standing behind the procurement process we went through, and I'm satisfied that the history of this is very clear to me.
But I'm not questioning the procurement process. I'm saying, should DOW now, if this whole issue is to kick off, is there enough time to look for an alternative sponsor?
It's getting very late. I mean, that's also a matter for DOW if they would choose to pull out, and I don't see that they believe that's something they're likely to do.
Okay. Toilet's coffee. we move on to the Cultural Olympiad, it was a 4-year celebration, the UK culture on a scale not seen before. What portion of the £100 million budget has been allocated to the 4